in the second hour of the show. The time is 9:33 Central African time, and we're now going to be heading out to the United Kingdom, where protest has been criminalized in broad daylight. The UK Parliament has officially proscribed Palestine Action, a direct action group known for disrupting weapons factories and military infrastructure linked to Israel's war on Gaza. The charge? Well, terrorism. The group had targeted Raf Briz Norton, a base used in Israeli surveillance over Gaza, and staged property damage at arms manufacturer Thales in Glasgow. The response? Well, a sweeping ban under the Terrorism Act, with activists now facing up to 14 years in prison simply for showing support and solidarity. But this goes beyond Palestine Action. Civil liberty groups, including Amnesty International and UN experts, are warning that the UK is now using counterterrorism law to silence political dissent, criminalize protests, and send a chilling message to anyone who dares speak out against the state-linked violence. And joining us now from London is Anas Mustapha. He's a lawyer and head of public advocacy at CAGE, a rights-based organization that's been closely monitoring this erosion of protest freedoms in Britain. Anas, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views once again. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
I think first and foremost, let's start with the basics. What exactly does proscription mean under UK law, and what does it now mean for anyone affiliated with Palestine Action?
Well, simply it means that an organization is now banned under the counterterrorism powers, which means the organization can no longer exist, cannot receive any funds, cannot be supported, and it cannot have any members, and all of that is punishable by it's a serious legal offence should that be violated in any sort of way. I mean, mere support for an organisation that's been proscribed can result potentially up to 14 years imprisonment in the most severe cases. So that's essentially what proscription is.
No, definitely. I want to focus on the UK government and its claims that Palestine Action, and I quote, met the threshold for terrorism, and this was after damaging military property. Do you really believe this is about terrorism or just about silencing effective protest and to silence Palestine solidarity in the UK?
I mean, it's of course it's a highly politicized decision. I mean, it's got nothing to do with the real act of terrorism. I mean, there's been rejection in the UK across the board of this decision, even amongst right-wing circles. So it's clearly understood that it is a political decision. It's done primarily to protect Israeli assets and weapons infrastructure here in the UK from the successful sort of direct actions by Palestine Action. And it's also the result of months, if not years, of lobbying by Zionist groups and weapons manufacturers. Leaks that have been published in British media have shown how government agencies, including the Home Office itself, have been heavily lobbied by the arms manufacturing industry, by Israeli officials and diplomats to prescribe Palestine Action, and most recently, about weeks before it was prescribed, a pro-Zionist group based in Israel produced a pamphlet outlining the legal framework upon which Palestine Action could be prescribed. So that's very clear. This is in response to those lobbying efforts and in response to protect Israel's ongoing genocide and its weapons manufacturing industry here in the UK. The Home Office tried to allege that the last action that Palestine Action did was against the RAF base, where two actionists mounted on electric scooters went onto a Royal Air Force base and sprayed two planes which are used in reconnaissance missions over Gaza with the red paint. and they claimed that there was millions of pounds worth of damage that was inflicted on these planes. Thereafter, flight trackers registered that these airplanes were back in the air within the week. So it's a highly politicized. There's lots of deception going on, and ultimately here, I mean, I heard in the introduction mention how the NGO groups have sort of vehemently rejected this prescription. Counterterrorism laws have been around for the best part of over 20 years now, and the way they function is to essentially limit the amount or the space for free speech, especially on matters of foreign policy and matters that are contentious issues. And they're used to police people's views and people's thoughts and beliefs. And that's the primary function of counterterrorism powers here, at least in the UK. They're very removed from acts of violence. So when people think of counterterrorism powers, they think powers to sort of investigate someone who is planning an attack against civilians. But the vast majority of counterterrorism arrests and counterterrorism investigations happen to deal with people who are committing non-violent offenses, like reading the wrong book or downloading the wrong video or supporting the wrong type of group. And these are the types of offenses that are happening, and these aren't violent offenses in any way, shape, or form. And now it's just been extrapolated and pulled now on the entire pro-Palestine movement here in the UK. I mean, it's absurd right now. So if on this phone call, for example, I extend, for example, solidarity perhaps with Palestine Action, I could risk being raided and arrested by the police, which is an absurd situation to be in. You mentioned images last week over the weekend actually, where a group of campaigners, outraged by this decision, they took to the streets of London outside the House of Parliament, and they lifted the placards saying, "We oppose genocide. I support Palestine Action," or words to those effects. And the police came, rounded them up, and arrested every last one of them. About 27 or 25 odd arrests that were made there and then. It's absurd. I mean, they were arresting pensioners, they were arresting the elderly. One of them was an 80-odd-year-old priest who was ushered away by police officers who are protecting the British public from this serious act of terrorism. It's an absurd reality. It feels totally dystopian, and it's just the state of how things are at the moment. And unfortunately, it has had a sort of serious, ripple effects across the whole Palestine sort of solidarity movement here in the UK. But people are determined to continue so long as the genocide continues. And of course, they may have banned or prescribed one particular organization, but you can't necessarily ban people taking direct action. This is something that's been happening in the UK. And funnily enough, I mean, the entire story is full of irony. On the day that that the MPs voted to prescribe Palestine Action overwhelmingly, they all took a collective photo wearing dresses that represent the suffragettes, who led a serious direct action campaigns for women's rights early in the century. And they all celebrated that in the House of Parliament by taking a group photo as part of Parliament's sort of commemoration of their sort of efforts for women's rights and equality. And then they go into the chambers and vote to prescribe another group, which is taking direct action to stop the genocide. It's totally absurd. And if this wasn't happening for real, you'd think it's a made up joke.
Very, very ironic that you should mention that. But Anas, I wanna focus now on how the broader Muslim and maybe pro-Palestinian community in the UK is responding to all of this. Are people feeling afraid, or do they feel more defiant? I mean, we've saw. I think I was just scrolling online and I saw a new group calling itself Yvette Cooper, which has already emerged,
Hmm.
and they're essentially mocking the state's move. Can we say this is the beginning of a new cycle of underground resistance, or does the ban risk even radicalizing even more the next wave of protesters and the pro-Palestinian community at large?
I mean, I don't think. I mean, if you look at the numbers that attended the Palestine Action hearing, the last one, where they lodged a sort of an 11th hour appeal against their prescription, upwards of 1,000 people were on the streets, and this was of like an overnight call out, and these are people from all walks of life. So, I mean, the solidarity and support exists there on the streets across the country. Yes, of course, with any decision like this, there's going to be a sense of anxiety, stress. There will be some apprehension as well from people as like, what does this mean? How do we respond? But we at Cage International have issued sort of explainers, know your rights on Palestine Action. Other organisations have done similar work to provide that sort of reassurance and guidance to people as to what and how they can approach these issues. I don't think this is going to have a chilling effect. Yes, initially it was shocking to people to see the government dare to tackle a protest movement in using the language of counterinsurgency and the laws of counterterrorism. But I guess it's only awakened people to the reality that if you're campaigning for Palestine, there needs to be people must be willing to sacrifice and must expect the pushback from the state, and I think people will only continue so long as the genocide continues.
No, definitely. And as we're going to run that note, thank you so much for giving us the latest update. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you very much.
There you go. That was Anas Mustapha coming to us live from the UK, where, yeah, man, it's situations like this that sometimes remind me that as a South African, we tend to forget just how much we still have, especially when you look elsewhere and see how quickly it can be taken away. Just this week, the UK, the so-called cradle of democracy, has officially banned a protest movement, not because it called for violence, but because it dared to disrupt the flow of weapons that are used in mass genocide and ethnic cleansing of the people of Palestine. Because it linked Britain's arms industry to the bombs that are falling on Gaza at this moment. Makes you think, eh? Palestine Action, a group that used paint, lock-ons, and rooftop protests to shut down Israeli-linked weapons factories, has now been proscribed under terrorism law in the UK. That means you can be arrested simply for wearing their T-shirt, for tweeting in their support, or saying their name out loud in public. Eh? And here in South Africa, I don't know for how much longer, but we need to appreciate the fact that we can still march openly for Palestine. We can still organize. We can chant in the streets, in university debates. Our churches and our mosques can still mobilize and say, yes. Even us, the media space, on this show, can still call out injustice without fear of criminalization. So let's not take that freedom for granted, because what's happening in the UK is not far away. It's a warning that when protest becomes too powerful, power will also respond with repression. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues after this.